What's up, folks? Welcome to 4th and 16 Sports. I'm your host, Ellis Tolbert, coming to you live from Pronk Studios here in Greenville, South Carolina. Welcome back. We were off last week. We're back in action now. Got a lot of stuff to talk about. We're going to be talking about some Clemson Pitt recap. We're going to be doing a little bit of a Clemson Virginia Tech preview for you all. We're going to be talking about some other things around college football as well. Florida State being trash still. Ohio State needing to play this weekend, but not really mattering for the college football playoff conversation, and some other things. So we're going live, simulcasting over on 4th and 16 Sports page. We're also going on Seldom Used Reserve and the Roar page. We're also going live to you from YouTube. Get in the comment section. Please like and hit that notification button. We want to hit that little bell. Make sure we're going. We're getting some subscribers out here. We're having fun. We're on a road to 1,000. I don't know how many we have, but thanks for all the guys that are watching tonight. Facts and Childress, how you doing tonight, man?
It's doing great. Coming off a Clemson win, coming off of Thanksgiving, good times.
Yeah, we're having a good time. Hopefully, you guys all had a great Thanksgiving weekend. We really appreciate you guys sticking with us all this time. We're ready to talk some football, man. I'm ready. So let's go ahead and get into it. First and foremost, Clemson wins the game against Pitt, 52-17. I think they took out a lot of their demons on Pitt. Got out to a 31-0 start in the first quarter. And I think that's what we all expected to see. I think that, the frustrations from losing a very tight game with Notre Dame to expecting to play and having the game canceled right at the cusp of game time and then having to take that week off, I think that just made Clemson really angry. It also got them a chance to get healthy, get back in the swing of things. And I think a lot of people thought that they were going to come out really rusty. I didn't see that.
No, I really thought that this was sort of a revenge game. Not really revenge, but just there was a lot of pent-up anger from the Tigers. I mean, we've seen Clemson come out after losses and just throttle people in the past, and that's what I was expecting. I think Florida State would have gotten this to a much worse degree if we had played Florida State and they wouldn't have chickened out of the game. But that's a different topic.
No, we're going to talk about that later for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I think that the Tigers played fantastic, and this game could have gotten a lot uglier if they would have kept their foot on the pedal. I think they kind of pulled it off.
Yeah, Clemson really just dominated this game. Hit a little bit of a lull in the second quarter and the beginning of the third, but ended up really turning it on. A lot of guys cleared the bench. Everybody played.
Oh, yeah. Will Sweeney was getting first
Will
quarter
Sweeney
snaps.
was getting snaps, man.
Yeah.
So it's good to see that. It's good to see that Clemson is going to go into this Virginia Tech game with things that they need to fix, even in a 52-17 win. We're seeing a lot of things happen right now. Trevor Lawrence, no rust. Kid had been off for 5 weeks. But you know what? He came back. He looked sharp. 403 passing yards, one away from matching his Georgia Tech career high at 404 yards. I was hoping Dabo was going to leave him in there a little bit longer, get him like 405. Just pad the stats a little bit. I know that people don't really like to talk about padding stats, but I think it's an important thing for Trevor. He's got some other things he wants to look forward to. I know everybody says, Heisman, he doesn't care about Heisman. Yes, he does. If you're a competitor, you want to win. Why not, right? But, I saw some things like that. I saw the running game pick up a little bit. That's very good, especially going down this championship stretch. You're going to need to run the ball, especially against Notre Dame, and you're going to need to run it for sure in the playoffs. Of course, you got to beat Notre Dame to get to the playoffs, but, it is what it is. Another thing that I really thought was impressive, the freshman receivers stepped up. E.J. Williams, touchdown catch. I mean, that looked like some DeAndre Hopkins type stuff out there. He wore the number 39 for his father who died in the military. Rest in peace. And also seeing the guys that are upperclassmen, like, Amari Rogers, Cornell Powell, again, for the third game in a row, 100-plus yards. Second game in a row with 150-plus. This guy's balling out.
And listen, we came into the season, and the consensus among us and pretty much the entire Clemson nation was that Amari Rogers was the number one wide receiver. He was going to be getting the majority of targets, majority of receptions, and he would lead the Tigers in receiving, stuff like that. Cornell Powell has completely taken over that role, and I can't say I'm entirely surprised as to where this is coming from, because I do think that Cornell has an immense amount of talent, and I think that Cornell has been kind of waiting his turn behind some more talented players, but there's no doubt in my mind that he can step up into this wide receiver one role and be consistent in it. And this is showed. He stepped up in back-to-back games, 150 plus yards. He played fantastic against Notre Dame, and he just always seems to be open right now.
Yeah, he does. And it's just super good to see that because we're already down a couple receivers. Joseph Ngata out with a stomach surgery. He's getting healed with that. It's been bugging him all year. Then you also had Frank Latson, who now has a foot injury, who has been essentially non-effective all season, and Justin Ross not being available for this 2020 season whatsoever. It's just really nice to see other guys stepping up. Clemson needs those guys, and I'm really excited about that too. Also, seeing guys on the defensive side of the ball get back. We saw Tyler Davis come back in. His presence was immediately known. Jamie Skalski, his presence was immediately known. He is the quarterback of the defense, and I'm telling you, the defense just looks like it runs smoother with him in the game. It seems like every level of play, from the D-line to the linebackers to the secondary, just gets better when you have Jamie Skalski. He's got there pointing, leading people in the right direction. He's tipping off different tendencies. That's what we needed to see. And I got to like Jamie Skalski for sure.
And I don't want to rile anyone up, but I think Clemson beats Notre Dame with Jamie Skalski. I don't think there's any question. And when you just look at the impact that he has on the field, and when you look at, he can cover for so much in the run game. He really can. If someone's not in the right spot, he's always going to be able to fill that gap. And that play Kylan Williams had in one of the first plays against Clemson, I think Jamie Skalski would have been able to stop that. And there are a multitude of other plays you could point to in that game where Williams was breaking free on the Clemson defense, where you got to say to yourself, if Mike Jones Jr. and Jamie Skalski were there, then I think that's a different story. But I do think that looking forward, Jamie Skalski is the most important player on this defense, hands down, no question about it. And his presence cannot be talked about enough.
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of him being able to, again, read the football field. He knows what's going on. He can key off things that, Venables is just not quite ready for yet. He's a great player, but it makes him play a little bit slow, less aggressive than a guy like Jamie Skalski can, because he knows what he's looking for. That's the important thing about this defense. They play faster when you know what you're doing. So I'm just super happy to have those guys back again. You mentioned Mike Jones Jr. He's that safety valve, kind of. I think Dabo called him that, where he's going to tighten up the loose ends, especially a guy that's a hybrid player. He plays in the secondary, he plays in linebacker core. He's got his hand in a lot of different things. And then seeing all the other guys step up in the secondary. Of course, you did not have Landon Zanders in that. You had Ray Thornton step up, play very well. I thought that Mario Goodrich really, really stepped up. This is something we've been waiting for with this kid for a while. He was a late Darian Kendrick was a late scratch for the game. I think he might be in Dabo's love shack, is what he likes to say, and he did something dumb. But, we were able to play well without that guy's veteran leadership out there. And then we also, on the other side, you had some other corners step up. Of course, Andrew Booth still looks really good. Lee Anthony Williams stepped up, played well in spot of Sheridan Jones. So I'm super excited about that. And Tyler Venables, hey, he did his job. That's all I can ask for. Same for Nolan. Nolan can be a playmaker. He is more consistent than athletic, I would say. No one would ever say this guy is going to shine in the combine, but he is a consistent player, and that's all you really need. So I think this defense plays well as a unit when everybody is there. Again, that's predicated on having a presence in the middle of the line with Tyler Davis, and you having Jamie Skalski out there being able to direct traffic. Super excited about that. Folks, we're also going to talk about the rankings. That's coming out a little bit. I think right now we'll talk about that a little bit. But some other things that I saw from Clemson, I want to go back to the run game. I was very impressed with seeing it happen. But, folks, I want to talk about why I think it looks better. Trevor Lawrence has a lot of freedom with the RPO. He has the freedom to be able to call it as a run or a pass. We see this sometimes can get confusing. We saw that one long pass touchdown to Amari Rodgers get called back because Walker Parks was a little bit too far outside of the line of scrimmage. He was down the field and ineligible.
That happened multiple times.
And that happens multiple times because it's one of those things the quarterback has the judgment. If you hold on to it a little bit longer and the guys don't know what the pass tag is, it's going to make it difficult to know what you're doing.
Because these guys are in run blocking. They're like the offensive line and the RPO, if you don't know, run pass option. Offensive line is instructed to run block, and everyone else except the one or maybe two receivers running the route are under the presumption that this is going to be a running play. So when you see that you can't, if you don't get the ball out quick, you're going to get an illegal man downfield.
Yeah, every time.
I watched my team, the Eagles in the NFL. They've ran the system for close to 3 years now, and I'm going to guess they're tops in the league in an illegal man downfield. Because if you don't get the ball out quick and you decide to throw and he's covered, or you just got to eat it.
Yeah.
You can't throw it down the field. You scramble around because these guys are in run blocking and they're already past the line of scrimmage. You're going to get an illegal man downfield.
But the good thing about this, though, is that Trevor has that ability to know when that pass tag should be called.
Trevor does a very good job.
DJ doesn't.
Yeah.
We see that the run game gets a little bit more of an uptick when Trevor's out there with Travis Etienne. Of course, everyone is packing the line of scrimmage. They are daring Clemson to run the ball. Every team knows that balance is the killer of the offense. I mean, if you can go into the game and you can run as well as you can throw the ball, then you're going to be nearly unstoppable, right? Well, Clemson wants to go in there and try to do whatever they can to get some running yards. A lot of teams are stacking the box. If they're not stacking the box, they're bringing extra pressure or cat people, green dogging linebackers. They're doing something to get at Trevor Lawrence. But he's able to get it. This is why the run game looks better, in my opinion. Plus, there's some things that I think Clemson can do in the future, and I know that Tony Elliott's going to start doing that, and that's getting back to the bubble screens, getting back to the jet sweeps. Those things widen out the defense. It leaves you really vulnerable if you're going to bring extra men across the line of scrimmage. You got to win the line of scrimmage if you're going to do that. And then that just 1 second of Trevor holding, this is why that pass was so beautiful. That might have been one of the best passes I've ever seen Trevor throw outside of the Georgia Tech Hunter Renfrow touchdown a couple years ago. Mm-hmm. That was a beautiful on-the-money, only where Amari Rodgers could catch it pass. Unfortunately, you had an ineligible player downfield. So I think we're building on this. Clemson's getting better at it. This is a perfect time to get better at it. Again, this is the championship stretch. I think Clemson will actually end up being really, really good in the run game going forward. Seeing from Bobby over YouTube, I don't know your last name, Bobby. I'm Mahurin, sorry. Says top 7 is unchanged. So the top 7 from last week is unchanged. Of course, a lot of people had problems with Clemson jumping Ohio State. But right now, we don't even know if Ohio State's going to play this weekend. So it is what it is. But that's kind of cool. It's good to see that. And they're kind of setting that precedent that the top 7 is what's important. Everybody else, if you're 8, I hate to say this, you're not important. If you're 8 and back, we talked about BYU.
Talking to you, BYU.
They're not going to get a shot in it this year. They don't value BYU's wins.
The team's not good enough. If I'm just being completely honest, I think that I've voiced this on the show before. I don't think BYU's good enough. And I think if there is a group of 5 school that could compete at this top level, it's Cincinnati. I think Cincy's legit.
I don't think Cincy's legit in the sense that they can actually win a playoff game, but I think they could be competitive.
They could compete.
I think they could be competitive.
Listen, if BYU's defense got on the field against Alabama, I think Alabama might score 70 points.
Yeah.
But I think Cincinnati's defense is good enough to at least hang. They'll hang. Since they can hang around, they can score some points.
They can.
They got some guys up front on defense that can create some havoc. I don't think they would win or even make it a one-score game, but I think they could keep it in that 14 to 20-point range that's respectable enough to say, hey, maybe we do this again. Another group of 5 schools.
Well, we'll have to consider that. Again, these implications, of course, it's a strange year, but these implications could be for the future.
If there is any year where there's going to be a group of 5 school, it is this year.
Yeah,
it's COVID, it's 2020. People aren't playing. The Pac-12's playing like 6 games. Ohio State's now going to play, 6 games?
Yeah.
Anyone can get it.
Yeah. I mean, hey, again, this top 7 is setting the precedent that if you're not in that top 7, you do not have a shot at getting to the playoffs. All these other teams are set up to make moves. So everybody else is stuck and you're left out. We'll talk about that later because we're going to talk about how the Pac-12 and the Big 12, no shot, not this year.
Also, how is Georgia still so high? Who have they beat to be so high?
Good question, but I think they are doing it based off of eye test now with JT Daniels. I have to give them credit.
JT's been really good.
If JT was healthy, maybe you win that game against well, no, they did. Yeah.
They've won every game but Florida and Bama.
Yeah. If they could actually have playing, they could have possibly competed with Florida. I think they could have beat Florida. I don't know about Alabama.
It was pretty impressive showing offensively from Florida.
It was. So, especially against the defense at that point in time. Granted, I think that game was without Richard LeCount, but it is what it is. But moving on back to Clemson game, So we saw some things from this defense again. I want to, the offense did what they did. 581 total yards. That's incredible. But the defense really did something that I was impressed with. Now, Pitt's offense with Kenny Pickett healthy was actually pretty good. At one point, Kenny Pickett led the country before his injury in passing yards. So the guy was pretty dang good. They had a complement of guys to play on the offensive side of the ball. They got some weapons over there. He had 4 interceptions all year long to this point. 4 interceptions in this game. Could have been 5. Actually could have been 6. Clemson really was just opportunistic. That really set up the field. Short playing field for Clemson's offense. Went out there and capitalized. That is what's going to get Clemson to be successful in the playoffs. They got to win the turnover battle. Of course, there was one egregiously bad fumble from Trevor. But you're going to have that. Outside of that, Clemson's still +4 in the turnover margin. And scoring pretty much on all of those. If they can do that now and start to build on that, you got to think there's only about 3 more weeks of regular season play. There's a good chance that Clemson goes very deep into the playoffs.
And listen, we're all eyes are obviously on that Notre Dame game at this point. That is the game that is make or break for the Tigers. If Clemson wins, they're 100% in the playoffs, no questions asked, probably as a top 2 seed. When you look at that Notre Dame game and you look at what went wrong in that game, Clemson's defense, number 1, could not get off the field to save their lives.
No.
They could not get off the field to save their lives. Number 2, did Clemson force a turnover in that game outside of
They
that
did
one?
not.
That Ian Book fumble.
The one fumble was the only one. There was no other interceptions. There was no fumbles.
The fact that we could not pick off Ian Book with those weapons is embarrassing, frankly. And I think that's more indicative on the lack of Skalski, Mike Jones, and stuff to stop the run game. Because if you could stop the run game, you're going to have to force them to throw the ball. And they were getting easy plays off of play action because Clemson had to put 7 in the box.
Yeah.
So
sure.
I think you're going to be looking at a completely different game with this defensive unit that I saw yesterday. Once you said against Kenny Pickett, good player, had a really good season so far. Just
terrible game against Clemson.
Got absolutely trounced. And this reminds me a lot. This reminds me a lot of the Wake Forest game last year with Jamie Newman.
Yeah.
You came into the game and you had a quarterback that's kind of an upstart guy. You knew he was pretty good going into the season, but he's having a really good year. And Clemson just embarrassed him and made him look bad.
Yeah.
And I think that this is the turning point for the Tigers. I think that this game was a statement game, and I think we are going. We'll get into this later in the show about what we think is going to happen against Virginia Tech, but I think that game's going to be ugly as well.
Yeah, let's go ahead and get into that now while we're at it. And let's not even waste any time doing it. So Clemson is going to be traveling to Blacksburg to play the Virginia Tech Hokies. They are 4-0 against the Hokies in the last four games. Been pretty big margins, too. I think 17-point margin difference.
Yeah.
Of course, the last time this game was not supposed to happen. Of course, this was a last-second game that was added with all the COVID schedule changes. I think earlier in the year, before anything happens, you might have a different mindset about this game going in. I think a lot of people thought that Virginia Tech was going to be much, much better. They've been ravaged with COVID. A lot of different things. Coaching decisions, kind of weird. I don't know that Fuente makes it out of this year. He wanted to go to Baylor last year, remember?
He should have gone
and
to Baylor.
They did all that weird stuff. He probably should have went, but they do have some things that could be worth watching. They have a quarterback in Hendon Hooker.
He's mobile.
Very mobile, very good, very elusive. If Clemson can't contain him, we might be looking at a similar game to Notre Dame. However, I will not say that Hendon Hooker's anywhere as good as Ian Book at this point in his career.
This is a good
game for that.
This is a good tune-up game because, like you said, Hooker's mobile. Exactly. And I would say he's more mobile than Book. Book's more of sneaky mobile.
Yeah, and he's much bigger than Book, too. He's 6'4", 220.
Because Book's not looking to run, if that makes sense. Book is a last resort runner that can kind of shock you in open space if he gets there. This is a good game for if Clemson ends up playing Ohio State. I'm not saying Hendon Hooker is Justin Fields.
Yeah.
But this is a similar type guy that you would throw on the practice squad or scout team.
Yeah. And honestly, at one point in the year, Virginia Tech's offense was humming.
It was very good.
I mean, they were good.
They put up, they had 15 people on COVID reserve first game of the year and put up 45 on Notre Dame
on
North Carolina.
They were scoring with North Carolina. So they've got a really good running back, too. Good transfer. They've got some decent receivers.
This is the perfect scenario for a tune-up game for Clemson.
I have concerns, especially after last week. We saw Pittsburgh trounce them. Pittsburgh, it was ugly. The same Pittsburgh team a week later came to Death Valley and just looked like one of the worst teams in the ACC. I don't necessarily believe that. I still think that Pitt is a very good football team. I think Clemson's better. They're not as talented as Clemson right now. But with that said, I'm not trying to equate, hey, well, Pittsburgh beat Virginia Tech really bad. Clemson beat Pittsburgh really bad, so they're going to put 100 on Virginia Tech. I don't want to go with that precedent. But if I know Dabo Swinney, he knows that it's championship mode now. They're probably going to be wearing orange pants. This is going to be a championship qualifier game for Clemson. They're going to need to win this one to get that spot locked up. First of all, they got to play the game. We know with Florida State, it's hard to go somewhere and have a team bail out on you. I don't think Virginia Tech would do that, but Clemson has to play this game. So it's very important for them to do this. If they want to have a shot at anything postseason, they're going to have to win this game. I have a hard time thinking that Virginia Tech's going to keep Clemson under 60 in this game.
60?
60.
You think that Clemson gets 60?
I do. With that said,
what's the line on this game? Is it 22?
It's 21.
21. So they think it's a 3-score.
They do.
Huh. So it sounds like you think Clemson's going to cover.
I think Clemson's going to cover. I'm wondering though if we can keep Virginia Tech mentally low. So what I mean by that is if you give them any confidence, this is why I think Notre Dame beat Clemson. It's the first play of the game. Kyron Williams runs for that 50-yard touchdown. Mm-hmm. That first play gave them all the confidence to know that they could hang with Clemson and win the game. They had no doubts in their mind after that they can win that game. You're playing up in Blacksburg. It could be cold. Everybody keeps asking everybody, oh, what do you do with cold? They did the same thing against Boston College, and they blew out Boston College. It is what it is. But you don't want to give Virginia Tech any confidence at this point in time. Why? Look, I understand, yeah, we want Clemson, somebody to represent the ACC. But if you're Virginia Tech, your last shot to make this season meaningful, beat Clemson at home. Why not? Right? You want to be excited. You want to get pumped up. You want to beat Clemson. That's what they're thinking. Clemson has to take that from them. They have to go out and exert dominance immediately, make Virginia Tech go, hey, well, it was fun. We got to play Clemson. We see how good they are.
They need to do what they did. They need to do what they did last week. They need to come out and they need to stomp on their throats immediately.
And I think that's what Clemson's going to do.
I think it's going to happen as well. I don't think Virginia Tech can hang. I really don't think they can hang. I don't think their defense can get them off the field. And Pitt's defense is significantly better than Virginia Tech's, like miles ahead of Virginia Tech's.
Yeah, they are. Braxton Matthews comes in and says, I think Virginia Tech is the only ACC team that Trevor hasn't played yet. Pretty cool to see him with the wins against all of the ACC teams.
Has he played Virginia?
He hasn't played Virginia Tech.
He has not played Virginia
So Clemson last played Virginia Tech 2017. That was with Kelly Bryant and Zarek Cooper and Hunter Johnson. So he's correct. That's actually a really good thing. I want to see that. I'm glad to see that. Darren Black over on YouTube as well. He says, what do you think about Malcolm Green? PFF, Pro Football Focus College, graded him as the highest graded true freshman in the country. I think it's 87%. The guy was out there just balling. You hear Dabo and Brent Venables complimenting the guy. You know he did a good job.
Yeah, he was fantastic.
I want to go ahead and praise this kid too.
Freshman.
A lot of people don't understand about this. The kid is actually a junior at Clemson right now. So in high school, he had enough credits to get through an associate's degree. So he already has an associate's degree. He is technically, from academics-wise, a junior at Clemson. As far as playing in his timeline, a freshman. So the kid's already on track to graduate. He'll graduate next year in his sophomore year.
He's got to be all academic.
He's got to be all academic team. So, we had been hearing about him all in camp too, that he was out there making plays. It was really cool to see him get out there and do it. I'm glad you brought that up because I think something important to mention is that while I think that the youth was the reason why you lose against Notre Dame, I think the youth is why you might make some noise in the playoff this year because those guys now know what it takes to play in relief. They were getting snaps with the starters. Jake Venables, Sheridan Jones was out there. You saw Ray Thornton, Joseph Charleston. All those guys are out there playing more snaps than you would really like for them to play at this point. That's going to help Clemson out because what's going to happen, you're going to be playing Notre Dame, and it's going to be a tough game. And we talked about this before. Jackson Carman, 100-plus snaps against Notre Dame. That's going to tire anybody out. But if you can relieve these guys with guys that you can trust because they've played the game, they have experience, now you're not a freshman anymore. You're 9 games into the season. So I think what that's going to do is help Clemson out as far as the depth. You know, Clemson likes to brag about we too deep. Well, let's see it now, and I think we're going to. So good point. I want to see that. Ross Luna's in there. I'm a Texas A&M fan. I'm just so disappointed in Kellen Mond. Yeah, we're going to get to that in just a second. But I think that Clemson's floor in this game, if they come out mentally prepared like we think they will be, is 60 points. I think they could actually score 60 points. Clemson left points on the board against Pittsburgh. Could have scored easily 70 points. And I just think that right now, again, with what this game means to the program, what you need to do to be able to advance into the playoffs, you want to get into the ACC championship. You don't want Notre Dame to come in their first year, might be the only year, and come in and win the ACC. Clemson has won it for the last 5 years, and I'm fully confident that they will. I will say this, though. I don't want people thinking that Clemson's going to just blow out Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame has actually improved since they played Clemson. We've seen some things. Their receivers are stepping up. We've known that their tight ends are really good, and their running game just keeps getting stronger. Their defense is playing more confident. Lou Fowles, he's amazing linebacker. Kyle Hamilton is a really good safety. I'm still not sold on their corners, Bracey and McLeod, but their D-line is monstrous. So Clemson's got to play their A game to win that game.
I really wish we had Justin Ross.
I wish we had Justin Ross. I wish we had Justin Foster
in that
all
Notre
those
Dame
guys.
Game.
Yeah, I think so,
and
too.
it was really good seeing him run down the hill with the American flag on Celebration Day.
And, you know, the thing is that people have to remember is that there's a chance that Justin Ross might not play again. So seeing him run down the hill was very important. Of course, you know, his mother was in the military as well. She was actually deployed when Dabo Swinney was recruiting him. So he didn't even meet her until he was already on campus. So that's actually really cool. But it's one of those things where we might not get that guy back. If we do, it'll be a miracle. I'm super happy about it. But I'm also happy about the rest of the guys. But again, I'm tending to say that because of what this game means, Clemson's going to score in the 60s. In this game. I can see a score of 63-14, 63-21, something like that. If they're playing the game that we think they will, I don't know the Virginia Tech scores, but I don't want to have orange-colored glasses. My unbiased opinion is I think that they're probably going to score anywhere between 14 and 21 points. I do think Clemson's going to score a lot, though. They're tuning themselves up because they might have a matchup on the 12th, and we're going to get into that now. Or they might not. Of course, the Florida State game was canceled against Clemson. And the only date that they could make that up would be December 12th. That is a week before the ACC championship game, which Notre Dame has effectively locked up because the game against Wake Forest has been canceled. No longer postponed, canceled. Wake Forest is in it. So long they beat Syracuse. I mean, even if they don't lose to Syracuse, they're in. Clemson has to win this one unless, you know, Miami doesn't play a game this weekend, but of course they immediately scheduled them against Duke this weekend, so they're going to get a shot to do it. But Florida State's cancellation is going to make Clemson have to, consider playing. Now, of course, Dabo went on a scorched earth path on that one. He was very mad. I'm pretty sure they're still fuming about this. But, he's right. He's within his rights about doing that. You had something ripped away. You had the ACC come out and say that they were in guideline. They followed protocol and was able to play. They offered multiple different options. Play later that day, play Sunday, play Monday. Florida State gave up, did not want to do it. They did the same thing to Virginia, and then immediately the next day they canceled the game for the following week against Duke. So Florida State kind of mailed it in. Now, the ACC since then has come up and said, hey, we're going to reschedule some of these games. You didn't see anything about Clemson playing. So I think Clemson's going to have this off week before Notre Dame. Notre Dame's going to have an off week before Clemson. We're going to see both of these teams at their peak, and that's exciting. I am super excited about that. But Florida State, I don't know how to take them. So for Clemson, obviously, they are on the wrong precedent that Clemson traveled with a symptomatic player. That's been debunked. But the next week, they also canceled Virginia, who flew in to Tallahassee because they only had 44 players, and they just found out through contact tracing that they were only going to have 44 players, which is well below, I think it's 52 players that you have to have available on game day. They said they didn't know until game day, right before the game. I'm calling BS on that. I'm just going to be honest with you. I think they knew beforehand. I think they mailed it in, and then they immediately canceled the Duke game. I think they tried to get out of playing. Of course, this team has had opt-outs, injuries, poor play. In my mind, I felt like they tried to mail it in, but now they're not going to get out of it. So how do you feel about this Florida State debacle? I mean, do you think that they can ever recover from this within the next 5 years? And I don't think so. I think they're going to be, me personally thinks they're going to be in the dumps for a couple of years.
I don't understand how this program has fallen so far off so fast, but I can't lie to you. I'm not mad about it.
I'm not mad about it either.
I'm not mad about it at all. Listen, this program is dusted. There's just one word for it. I don't see any way out of this, like you're saying. The recruiting classes are consistently going down, down, down. Norvell looks like a bad hire, even though we all thought he was a good hire. But then again, most people were praising the Taggart hire. It just seems like this is where coaches go for their careers to die at this point. And I don't want to write Norvell off or who the guys he's going to end up bringing in. I don't want to write any of them off yet. I'm just saying that that's where this is trending, and this is a very bad look for the program overall, especially if these games don't end up being made up, one against Clemson specifically. This is overall a program that is past its prime and has no foreseeable way out of the hole they've created for themselves.
Well, they're 2-6 too.
It's not like they're good.
The one thing that they had to hang their hat on was a win against North Carolina when they were number 5. But as we've seen now, North Carolina has dropped a few games, and that win's not very important anymore. Of course, it's like, hey, you beat North Carolina, but I mean, it is what it is, right?
If North Carolina brought their A game on that, or even their C+ game on that one day, they're 1-7.
Yeah, if North Carolina just scores on the first drive of the third quarter,
they're 1-7.
They're 1-7. I think that Florida State, and I see something from Bobby over on YouTube as well. He says Florida State should have to pay Virginia and Clemson for travel fees. They can't do it. They don't have the money. Florida State right now is in one of the worst situations ever. Thrasher and Coburn over there, the AD and president, have some terrible things going on. They just don't have the money. They don't have the funds. They're not refunding any ticket sales, which I can understand, but the travel fees, if Clemson is going to go back down there, you're going to have to fit the bill. They don't have $300,000 to do that. If Virginia is going to come down for Virginia, they don't have the money to send that. That's probably more money than Clemson spent to get down to Tallahassee. So I just don't see that working out. I do think I'm seeing somewhere here. Did they reschedule against Miami? Well, not Miami. They already played Miami. Did they reschedule against Duke? Or was it Virginia? If you're in the comment section, let us know. I can't quite remember, but I do know that the ACC did make them play this game with an option to even play possibly on the game day of ACC championship. Nobody's gonna watch the game. Nobody wants to watch the game anyway. But it's just interesting to see what happened with Florida State. And like I said, it makes an impact for Clemson. Clemson has to play this game this weekend, or they have to make it up next week. So we'll see what happens. They're not the only team in the country, though, that's going to be dealing with some games issue. There's a lot of teams out there that's going to be worked out. Ohio State moving over to the Big Ten. They are critical right now. Of course, they had the tight game against Indiana. Then you had a game canceled against Maryland was canceled. Then you had a tight game with Indiana, which is why, in my opinion, they dropped Ohio State in the rankings, college football rankings. And then you had them have the game canceled this past weekend. Well, if the game against Michigan State this weekend gets canceled, Ohio State will be below the amount of number of games that you need that's required for the Big Ten to be able to play into the Big Ten Conference Championship, effectively making Indiana win the East. Now, Indiana has to play a game too. They have to end up playing all their games that they have left. They have to win. If Indiana loses a game, especially now that Michael Penix is out, which is terrible, the guy was lighting it up. It's the same ligament that he tore in his freshman year, the literal same ligament. He tore the same ACL. Right now, Jack Tuttle was playing for him. Of course, he was 5 of 5 in the game that when he came in relief. They won the game, but is anyone picking Indiana to win without Michael Penix? Probably not. That's the eye test for Ohio State. Remember, conference championship is not a prerequisite for getting into the playoffs. I mean, we've seen Alabama do it. Ohio State themselves have done it twice. They are the kings of getting in without, which is why I say it doesn't matter if Indiana and Northwestern play in the Big Ten Conference Championship. Ohio State's still going to get in, folks. They might get in at 4, they're still going to get in. Now, there's some interesting things we'll talk about with this in a second, but Ohio State needs to play this game this weekend, not only for the eye test, but for the chance to play in the Big Ten Conference Championship. The Big Ten is so strange. You have Northwestern fresh off of a win and then being ranked in top 8 and then losing against Michigan State and Rocky Lombardi with the ice blonde hair. I don't understand how this season's working. But for the Big Ten, they absolutely need this to happen. And think about it. The Big Ten might implode this year. Nebraska, still very bad. Michigan, probably going to fire Jim Harbaugh. Wait, a couple of years too late, but they're going to do it. James Franklin at Pitt might get fired. I would not be upset about that. I don't know what the Big Ten is doing, but if they want to get into playoffs, they need to do everything they can possibly do to get Ohio State to play. Now, they have that crazy protocol where it's 21 days.
Yeah.
If you didn't have enough players because of the protocol to play this past weekend, how are you going to play this weekend? I just don't see an opportunity for them to have enough players unless they're going out to scout team and then picking up guys from the intramural football team to be able to play. And then you risk possibly getting upset from Michigan State. I know a lot of people roll their eyes about it, but Michigan State has done it before. I don't know what happens with Ohio State, but in the end, do you think it matters?
It's going to be interesting. And this is going to be something that impacts college football for a long time, regardless of whether Ohio State gets in or not. Because what are you saying if you put in a 6-0 team that didn't even appear in their conference championship game?
But what are you saying if you put in? Well, it's saying you value that team's marketability more than everybody else.
Okay, so what if USC goes undefeated and wins their conference?
They're only playing 6 games, yeah.
But what is Ohio State's? At that point? What is Ohio State's case at 6-0 with 0 quality wins par Indiana, who has now doesn't?
But see, that's the fact. That's the key to everything that you're saying.
So you think the Indiana win is that valuable in the committee's eyes that they're going to value it over a conference championship game?
If Indiana continues to win. Now, if Indiana loses because Michael Penix is out, then they're going to change their opinion and say, hey, maybe Indiana was a much better team with Michael Penix.
I just don't
understand. But if they win, if they keep winning, then they're going to say, oh, well, that was just one of those games that Ohio State does every year.
I was just confused as to
I don't know.
What is Ohio State's case at 6-0? If you get an undefeated Pac-12 champ at 7-0, what's Ohio State's case to get in over those guys?
Well, what's the case for a Pac-12 champion? They don't have – Oregon was your best shot. They were a top 10 team, loses to Oregon State in the Civil War, which is a strange thing, but that's 2020 for you. USC is now probably not going to play a top 10 team anymore. I think the same thing applies for them, which is why I say if you're going to put Oregon or a USC up against, if they're both 6-0, up against each other, you're definitely going to take Ohio State because that's more money. Of course, USC is one of the most historic, traditional teams. They are the bluest of bloods in college football, but not for the last 20 years. Well, 15 years, right? We want to see what they can do now. But Ohio State has won championships. This is supposed to be the best team ever. You remember, we're just a couple weeks ago, can Justin Fields win the Heisman? And now everybody's just forgotten about him. They got dropped a little bit behind Clemson. So I think the narrative right now is that Ohio State can play themselves in, even if they're 6-0, over anybody else that's out there. But someone brought up a good point here. And I'm not just doing this. I'm going to be honest with you here. Ross Luna says, does Texas A&M make the playoff if Ohio State misses the Big Ten championship? I'm inclined to say the only way that happens is if 2 other teams lose. If Clemson loses to Notre Dame and if Florida loses to Alabama. Because if Florida loses to Alabama, I still think that head-to-head matters for the College Football Playoff Committee. I think Texas A&M could have a shot. If Clemson loses, then you're literally ragtagging at that point. You have to say, all right, well, we're going to choose between Clemson or Texas A&M. Clemson's going to get in over Texas A&M because you play the number 2 team in the country in the conference championship.
Listen, I'm about to say the most painful thing I've ever said on the show. I would put in a 1-loss A&M team over Ohio State with 6 wins.
I would absolutely do that.
And
I think
you
I
got to
would do
think
that.
from a perspective of A&M has that quality win over Florida,
Mm-hmm.
and their only loss of the year is to Alabama. Do I think Texas A&M is a particularly great football team? No. Do I think they're better than Ohio State? No. But do they have that resume that gives them a case? Yes.
Well, here's another thing, though.
What are they going to end up being? Who do they play next week?
Who?
Texas A&M.
Texas A&M is going to play. So they were supposed to. They were supposed to play Ole Miss the week before.
Okay.
So it's Tennessee, correct?
I think they have Tennessee and Ole Miss, and then do they have?
I think the Tennessee game is going to be.
They have Auburn
made
at
up.
some point. They still have Tennessee and Ole Miss to play at some point, and then I think they have Auburn at some point as well.
William Kirsting has a good point, but I want to come after that over on YouTube. He says A&M's poor showing against LSU hurt them a lot. Committee chairman just said as much, and I believe that.
I do believe that as well.
However, that's the same precedent that we had against against Ohio State against Indiana. They had a poor showing. You won the game. Indiana probably could have won the game. That dropped them a little bit. But for that top 7 to not change, I think that they understood that Texas A&M had a couple of weeks off. It's hard to be not rusty if you're not elite. And I'm not ragging on Texas A&M. I don't think they're an elite team. You have a quarterback that at one point in the game is 8 of 26. You're not elite.
He finished with 11 of 34, only over 100 yards. And listen, I just want to say to all the Texas A&M fans out there, you tried telling me this guy was some elite quarterback. I win. I win. This guy is not good. He is not better than.
I think he had a terrible game.
The fact that people compared this guy to Johnny Manziel is downright disgusting.
That's not good. That's not good at all. I would never compare it, and that's not fair. I don't think it's fair to Kellen Mond to
that's
try
a lot of pressure
to the best quarterback. That would be like saying that. I don't know. Kyle Parker is as good as Trevor Lawrence. He's not. He won some games, but he's not as good as Trevor Lawrence. It is what it is, right? But I think that what's going to be the best thing for Texas A&M is people in front of them losing and Ohio State potentially getting out. We'll get into that a little bit too. 11 of 34 is definitely unacceptable. I watched this game and I understand it was raining. I know that they literally had made the throwing game. It was obsolete. They had to run with Isaiah Spiller. At one point, I was like, "You're killing this kid. You really need to do something else." And you really don't see very many other backups for Texas A&M running the ball. So it tells you who the real star of the offense is. But I'm not gonna put too much on them. Texas A&M's defense put on a masterclass though. So while one side of the ball was pretty bad, the offense was pretty terrible. The defense played really well. I can say the same for Ohio State. They looked really sus against Indiana. It is what it is. You had a receiver, and Freifogel had 228 yards receiving. That's an issue.
A&M's defense is pretty good.
They're
great. Legit. They've had 2 bad games this year, and it was against the top 2 offenses in the country.
Right. So what are you going to do about it? Well, the other one was
Arkansas.
Vandy, but I
don't
really know what happened.
Their defense played good.
Yeah, they did. So I don't know what happened. Vandy does that, though. I remember a couple of years ago, Vandy beat Georgia, so it is what it is. But I think that the playoffs are going to get really sketchy, and we'll talk about that right now. I think the Big 12, with Iowa State beating Texas, essentially they have one more game to win, and they'll be playing Oklahoma in the Big 12 championship. Well, yeah, they'll be playing Oklahoma in the Big 12 championship. To me, that says the Big 12 is not getting in. Because the worst case scenario is if Iowa State wins the Big 12, you have no shot. And you don't want to root against the team, but if you're Oklahoma State, you've already got 2 losses. I mean, you guys got to mail it in at this point, right? Oh, or does Oklahoma State have 2 losses? I think they might have 1.
Oklahoma State?
Yeah.
They've lost 2 games.
They've lost 2 games. So, again,
They're
right
6-2.
now, all of your teams have 2 losses or more. You're done. I'm telling you right now, Ohio State would get in with 6 games only, no conference championship.
Over Oklahoma.
Over Texas, over Iowa State, over Oklahoma State. They're not getting in. The only other conference that might have a say in it is the Pac-12, but it doesn't look good that your breadwinner team just lost.
Yeah, and they are the only 2 undefeated teams in the conference, Washington and
Washington.
USC now?
How about that? I told you.
They're terrible.
I don't understand it.
They're so bad. They were down 21-0 to Jake Bentley and came back and won.
Yeah, but that tells you how bad that Utah is right now.
Whittingham is.
Yeah. Oh, we got one too. Bobby over on YouTube says RIP Derek Mason. Hey, I'm a ragger of Texas of Vanderbilt. I'm always going to say Vanderbilt's a terrible team, and they're built that way. They're never going to be good. They got pretty decent under James Franklin, but they're just not built that way. It's hard to get recruits there because there's such a crazy academic standard, and the guys who can do both usually go to Stanford or Notre Dame. So you're in a losing battle, and it's the same for Duke. I don't think that Duke will ever be a consistent 10-win team. They've had really good teams, but I don't think they'll ever do it. But RIP to Derek Mason. He did do something historic, having Sarah Fuller out there for the squib kick. A lot of people didn't know that was a squib kick, and it was like, oh, she kicked terrible, but that just tells you the state of people right now. That's another story that we'll talk about at a different time.
It looked intentional.
It looked intentional, and it was. Yeah. It was a squib kick.
I think
they probably should have.
Mason said that as much.
Yeah, it was a squib kick.
They should have prefaced it, though. They made it look really bad.
It made it look bad, and then everybody's going to say, well, she's terrible. Well, if they just let the girl kick like normal, she's a soccer player. She's probably a better kicker than 90% of the people out there. But people are going to have their opinions, and it is what it is. But let's get into overall playoff talk. Of course, Alabama sits in number 1. Alabama ain't losing to anybody.
Best team in the nation.
The best team in the nation right now is Alabama. Whether you like it or not, they have the best team at this point.
Their defense is starting to gel together too and play
at this point in the season, at least, right?
And I think Alabama's the clear pick for the national title as of this point.
Right, and I think that's the general consensus. I mean, Alabama is doing what they're doing, and it is what it is. But then you have number 2, a Notre Dame team who is now playing like they belong. Again, we've talked about this in past episodes. Notre Dame has always looked like a team that was like really good, and then they get in a postseason, they get beat up by whoever the elite team that they're playing is. And I think this year they have the confidence that they can play. Again, while they did beat a Clemson team that was a little shorthanded, they also have gotten better since then. So I think that they're gonna be competitive if they get in the playoffs. I think there's definitely a shot for them to get in the playoffs now. If Clemson wins, with all these other things that are happening around them, there's a great chance that they get in at number 4, regardless if they lose or not. If Clemson loses, I don't see them getting in. I just don't see it. They're going to have 2 losses. It is what it is. But if Notre Dame loses and it's a tight game, I think we're going to see Notre Dame get in. Now, if Clemson goes in and does the Clemson thing and beats the crap out of them, I can see them getting left out because
really?
The reason why I say this.
We're already talking about Ohio State replacements. Who would replace Notre Dame even in theory?
So let's get into it. So let's assume
A&M?
A&M. If Florida has a good game against Alabama, I'm talking about competitive down to the wire.
Because that win looks a lot better.
It looks much better because Texas A&M has kind of regressed a little bit, I guess. I still think that Texas A&M is one of the top 5 teams in the country. But I don't think that they have enough resume outside of the Florida win to really wow people. And let's be honest, you're just going off of opinions now that we have the committee. And going out and playing like that against a hapless LSU team, it doesn't look very good for them. But I think that if Clemson trounces Notre Dame, I think Notre Dame's out because the general consensus for everybody says, oh, well, you played a weak, beat-down Clemson team. That's why you won. You played them at home, too. If Clemson plays on a neutral site and beats down Notre Dame, I think Notre Dame gets left out. I don't think that happens. I think it's going to be 2-score game, and I don't mean 14. I mean like 10 points. In that case, though, if Clemson blows out Notre Dame gets left out. Alabama's going to get in. I don't see them losing. I don't see anybody jumping Alabama. Alabama's at 1. I would see Clemson go to 2. If they're already at 4 or at 3, they're going to go to 2. At that 3 spot, I still think Ohio State gets in. I am under the belief that Ohio State, no matter what you do, because of ratings, because of all the hype was behind this team, I do not see Ohio State getting left out regardless. Again, let's talk about this. 2014, you lose by 2 touchdowns at home in Columbus to Virginia Tech, a team that was not very good. All right? You lose by 2 scores, you get in the playoffs, You getting in there at 4, you beat Alabama, and then you go on to beat Oregon. Win a national championship, hey, we were right. But then they did this again in 2016. Penn State goes on to win the conference. Then what happens then? Ohio State gets chosen. They play Clemson. They get trounced.
Are we going to talk about that? Wasn't even the worst. That wasn't even the worst selection that year.
No.
They put in Michigan State.
Hey, no. Well, do we think that Michigan State or Washington? That was
they put in Michigan State the previous year, and then Washington
next year. And the reason why Michigan State was the worst team, in my opinion, than Iowa.
In the college football playoff era?
Iowa should, the worst, yeah, for sure. Iowa should have probably won the game.
They should have won. I remember, was it George Kittle? He got helmet-to-helmeted, and they did not call it.
They did not call it. So I think that Iowa should have probably went. They'd probably been more competitive, still losing to Alabama, but they would have been more competitive. And then the next year, Washington gets in.
24-7 game against Alabama.
Oh, my gosh. Remember at halftime, the guys were like, they're soft. Alabama players were like, they're soft going into the locker room. I was like, wow, that's pretty terrible. Yeah. But I definitely think that Michigan State was the weakest team that played. They didn't even score. So I think Ohio State gets in regardless at 3. Clemson will be playing against Ohio State again in the semifinal. Number 4, this is where it gets tricky because we have options here. So let's talk about what we want to do. Again, if Clemson, this is on the precedent, if Clemson blows out Notre Dame, you would have a Texas A&M team sitting there saying, hey, we beat Florida. The only team we lost to was Alabama, the number 1 team, the best team in the country. We should get a shot. You have Florida saying, hey, we went toe-to-toe with the number 1 team in the country. We should get a shot. Sure, we lost to Texas A&M, but we made it to the conference championship. And then you also have Cincinnati. I still think, again, we talked about this earlier, Cincinnati, pretty competitive. I think if you put Cincinnati on a neutral field against Texas A&M or Florida, they might hold their own.
Cincy's good.
They might hold their own. Those are the only teams that can get in. That's it.
Georgia's out. Iowa State's out. Miami's
Oregon's
out. Para Miracle.
Miami's out.
BYU's not going to make it. Coastal's not going to make it.
Nope.
So it's really just...
It's literally those 7
Alabama,
teams.
Clemson, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Florida, Texas A&M, and Cincy. Those are the 7.
Yep. And I think what would happen is they're going to...
Florida has to beat Alabama to get in.
That's right.
So it's really 6 unless Florida pulls a miracle.
And if Florida wins the game, then Florida doesn't go any higher than 2.
No, I'm convinced that if Florida wins that game, then the floor is going to be 2 SEC, 2 ACC, regardless of the result.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well,
I think that Notre Dame would get in over Ohio State.
I don't think so.
You think a 6-0 Ohio State team would get in over Notre Dame, whose 1 loss would be in the conference championship to Clemson?
Okay, so what kind of game are we talking about with Clemson?
Let's say 13.
Because I think that matters.
Let's say a 13-point game. Let's say Clemson wins 36-23.
I think Ohio State gets left out then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if it's under that 20-point barrier in that Clemson game, you think Notre Dame still gets in?
Well, see, let's talk about how that would be shuffled. I think Clemson would go to number 1 if Alabama loses to Florida. Remember, Florida is not going to crack number 5 at all. So the highest that they could go, in my opinion, would be 1. I think Clemson would play Florida 1-4. I think Notre Dame, depending on what happens, if it's a closer game, they get in at 3 and Alabama's at 2. So you'd have 2 ACC, 2 SEC, and you're right. I think Ohio State gets left out. Clemson blows out Notre Dame. Again, we keep saying this. If that happens, I think Clemson goes to, and we're going under the precedent that Florida beats Alabama, right? Mm-hmm. It's not happening, but Clemson goes to 1. I think Alabama goes to 2. They're not dropping any farther than 2. At 3, you would have Ohio State, which would be an epic matchup between those 2. And at 4, you have Florida. So Clemson would play Florida regardless.
So you think that if Notre Dame gets blown out, then that's the scenario?
Yeah, that's the only scenario that Notre Dame doesn't get in the playoffs, in my opinion.
I think Alabama's locked.
I think Alabama's locked.
I
think Notre Dame at this point is locked because I think that
unless Notre Dame to knock it in, Notre Dame would need a blowout loss against Clemson, and Florida would have to beat Bama. That's their only path to knock it in.
And to me, that's the only path too. I think that, of course, if Florida somehow beats Alabama, you have to put Florida in. I know Texas A&M lost to them, but that win supersedes Texas A&M's win against Florida. If you're Florida and you run the table after the Texas A&M loss, and you go on to beat Alabama, the #1 team in the country, in the conference championship, there's zero chance that they put Texas A&M in the playoffs and leave you out. That's just not happening, regardless of what happens with Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame would get in, and you'd have Clemson, Alabama, Notre Dame, and Florida. I think Ohio State would get left out. But again, we keep talking about the blowout. I don't think Clemson blows out Notre Dame. I don't think Florida beats Alabama. I think Texas A&M is going to play in a New Year's Six bowl. I think they're going to win the New Year's Six bowl because they're probably going to play some team that's not matched up.
BYU. That would be fun.
I think Texas A&M could play BYU.
Yeah.
I think they probably – well, no, BYU would have to be the second best qualifier. So what would happen is they would play Cincinnati. Yeah. So that would be a good matchup.
I think Cincy would.
I think Cincinnati could – I don't know that they beat them because I don't know that they're matched up as far as body-wise.
It would be a good look for the group of 5.
It would be a good look for a group of 5. And we've seen this before. UCF's done it to Auburn. Of course, Auburn was hurt all to hell and back, but they still
beat LSU too as
well. They did beat LSU.
Bad.
No, remember it was a back-and-forth game.
Wait, did they beat Auburn bad?
They beat Auburn bad.
They beat Auburn bad, and they beat them on the last play. It was almost the last play of the game against LSU.
Kerryon Johnson was hurt in that game. Jarrett was not playing a very good game. And at that point, they were like, hey, this is a national championship year. But then they played LSU the next time and then ended up getting beat bad. So it is what it is. But I think A&M is the enigma in it. I think because they have momentum based off of that Florida win, because it looks like a really good win now. You got Florida with Kyle Trask, who's a very high on the Heisman Trophy list. We'll see what happens. We'll talk about that next. But I think if Texas A&M stays the course, it's not a bad year if you don't get in the playoffs. Getting to a New Year's Six bowl as the second or the third best team in the SEC is really, really awesome. It'd be great. Hey, it is what it is. But I don't see a scenario where there's not going to be Clemson, Alabama, Notre Dame, and Ohio State. Right now, I'm betting my money
on that.
Just staying status quo.
So does that imply that – do you think Ohio State's going to end up playing this weekend or no?
I think they play. I think they're going to find a way to do it, because the last thing you want to do –
if they play this weekend and go and then they win the title game, then it's no question they're 100% on.
Or you play this weekend, you make all this effort to get out there and play, and you lose in East Lansing. And then it's like, hey, you'll never recover from this because you don't have any more games.
No, there's no
way. You're done.
There's no way.
You can't come back from that.
There's no way.
And look, I'm telling you, people don't understand. Michigan State is a trash team, but they are the best team for upsets. For some reason, they play better when they play better teams. When they play lower teams in the Big Ten, they play trash. It's bad. But for them to go on and beat Wisconsin, I don't know what's going on here. But, again, if we're talking about the playoffs, I don't see any scenario, because I think Clemson's going to beat Notre Dame, those 4 teams not being in the playoffs. So we'll see. Plus, again, going back to the A&M game, again, they had time off. They had a couple of weeks off, games postponed and all that stuff. And it's hard to do it. But if you're an elite team, you find a way. It looks like the offense just were like, hey, we don't know what we're doing here. We're just kind of hanging out. And the defense was like, we're ready to go. We've been practicing all week. Who was your scout team quarterback? Because they did a terrible job. TJ Finley had a terrible game, and somehow Kellen Mond was still not the better quarterback. It was equal.
You like KJ Costello hang 60 on a defense, and Kellen Mond didn't even put up 100 yards.
I have no idea. And not only that, but two, I will give credit to LSU's defense. They played
a really good game.
Really well. And that's always been the better side. Of course, Orgeron's in over his head. He's talking about winning another championship. They're not winning another championship anytime soon. He might win one, but he's built like Auburn. They're going to win a championship and then fade. It is what it is. You've had a lot of guys opt out. A lot of guys go pro. It is what it is. But I'm calling for Texas A&M to really go back to the drawing board, figure out what's going on. Of course, they have some injuries offensively. They're missing Brendan Chapman. Osborne's gone. It sucks. They really need to find somebody else to give the ball to outside of Isaiah Spiller. The kid cannot run the ball 100 times a game. You have to do something else. Kellen Mond really needs to step up. He was awful on his deep throws. They were kind of decent with their intermediate throws, and short passes did not exist. There was no checkdowns in this game. Weidermeyer was held all game. I don't know what happened with that. I don't know why the refs didn't call anything. And I obviously Spiller is a really, really good player, but they've got to find some kind of rhythm offensively. Get him some quick passes, get him some swing passes, anything to get him in rhythm. Kellen Mond is not going to win you a game if he's playing like that. Again, 11 of 34, completely unacceptable. That's almost like Kendall Hinton numbers for the Broncos this past weekend. So you just can't do that. But we're going to move over to the last topic we're going to talk about tonight, and then we'll do some picks for the week. But we're going to talk about the Heisman Trophy race. Of course, season started with all the social justice stuff, and the face of that and the face of, hey, we're going to play football again, was Trevor Lawrence. Of course, the season was in limbo. Nobody knew what was going to happen. Trevor Lawrence ended up getting with Darian Rencher, who's the Disney Player of the Year, which is awesome, most inspiring player in college football. Tyler Trent won it for Purdue, so that tells you how important that is. But Trevor Lawrence was the face of college football. He was the guy that was looked at as getting it back on track. Donald Trump messaged him, like, hey, good job, blah, blah, blah. He was the guy. To start the year, on fire. Out there, he didn't look like he did last year. There was no regression. He actually looked like a pro quarterback in this system. He misses a couple of weeks. Of course, he contracts COVID right before the Boston College game. He misses that game. DJ Uyunglele, 400 yards passing. Misses the Notre Dame game. DJ Uyunglele, 400 yards passing. We were supposed to come back for Florida State. That game is canceled. Then he had to wait to play against Pitt. He comes back, and he didn't miss a beat. Again, he was 1 yard away from matching his career high at Clemson. Remember, we're talking about a kid that's only lost one game in his Clemson career. But the guys in ESPN and media and everywhere kind of went cold on Trevor Lawrence. Didn't help that Kyle Trask is out there throwing 50,000 touchdown passes to Kyle Pitts. The guy's great. Mac Jones throwing 1 million touchdown passes. Justin Fields kind of dropped because he's in the same scenario as Trevor. Well, he's in the same scenario as Trevor. He didn't play a lot of games. People forgot about him, right? And the Indiana game was not very good. The last time you saw him,
picks than touchdowns.
Golly, and he threw 3 picks last year total. 2 of them came against Clemson. He only had 1 on the entire season up to that point. He's already matched that in 1 game. So it was not a good look for him. And again, Zach Wilson out of BYU, great player, not going to win it. He'll show up because that's a good field goal story, but he's not going to win it. I think Trevor Lawrence, with him being the face of college football, all that's ballyhooed about him, he's the greatest quarterback ever. He is the prototypical quarterback, 6'6", 220 pounds, has a laser arm. He's this. He's a good religious guy. He's a very smart player. I don't know how you don't give it to the best player in college football. I get it. A lot of people wanted to say, okay, Deshaun Watson should have won it over Lamar Jackson. Truth is, Lamar Jackson had more numbers than Deshaun Watson. You could say the same for a guy like Trevor against Mac Jones or, for sure, Kyle Trask. But the difference is Kyle Trask, right now, I don't care what you say, is not better than Trevor Lawrence.
No, he's not.
I love Mac Jones. Great quarterback. He is doing some amazing things over at Alabama. Not as good as Trevor Lawrence. No. Justin Fields, amazing player. Not as good as Trevor Lawrence. Zach Wilson is not in the conversation. I don't know how Trevor Lawrence doesn't win it. Can you find something outside of him not playing as many games as other people being the reason why Trevor Lawrence wouldn't win?
I mean, Trevor Lawrence is the best player in the country. He's the best quarterback in the country. It's just the numbers. It really does come down to the numbers, and it depends on what the Heisman selection process is just very weird. And I think that personally, Deshaun had a better case of winning it over Derrick Henry than he did Lamar, from a numbers perspective and a winning and just a narrative perspective.
But that's my point. That's the main key. So
it's about the narratives. It really
Lamar
is.
Jackson
it's a narrative-based award.
Well, that's true, and that's why I'm saying this. Lamar Jackson came into that 2016 season with all of the hype. Of course, Deshaun Watson was looked at just like Trevor. Hey, he just put up all those yards against Alabama in a national championship. Could have won that game. Hey, ballyhoo, right? But Lamar Jackson came out and did something we haven't seen in a long time. He made Johnny Manziel's numbers look small. He was out there leaping people, hurdling, juking. This is why the kid won the MVP in the NFL last year, because of numbers. He looked really good. But the narrative was always that Deshaun Watson was a better quarterback. He just didn't have the numbers. Now, in this situation, Trevor Lawrence started the year with all of the narrative, has great numbers. Remember, he only has, 2 interceptions in the year? He has great numbers. His team is poised to go play in the national championship again. The game that Clemson lost was when he was not playing. And then you also have all those things, again, off of the field, all the stuff that they said about him, about being a leader and the face of college football and a great guy, and he's a good social justice guy, and he's, he's only lost 1 game at Clemson and this and that, and he's going to be the #1 pick.
Narrative-wise, Trevor's golden.
That narrative, to me, supersedes the numbers because he can't control not playing. Now, if he just, opted out or was like, yeah, I don't want to play this game, or play those if he played against Boston College and Notre Dame, and let's say he played Florida State, and those 3 games in that stretch were bad, yeah, I can see an argument why Kyle Trask should win it over him.
But he didn't play.
But he didn't play, and it was not his own choice. He would have been back last week and put up even crazier numbers than this past week. I tell you right now, he would have had 600 yards passing against Florida State. But he didn't, and that's not his fault. As a Clemson fan, it sounds like I'm rooting for Trevor just because I'm a Clemson fan. But if you're looking at this unbiased, the narrative the entire time was Trevor. It didn't matter that Kyle Trask was out there throwing all those touchdown passes earlier in the year, just the same as Trevor was. It didn't matter that Mac Jones was doing it. When Trevor stopped playing, people forgot about him.
Yeah.
Now, so it doesn't help that DJ had 400 yards against Notre Dame's defense. But at the same time, again, I think the narrative sits there. I think in my heart of hearts, Trevor Lawrence is going to win the Heisman. He's going to be the first Heisman player for Clemson. That narrative, plus they're going to move everything back in. I think Heisman voting, official voting, is going to be moved back from where it normally would. But remember, folks, this would be the week after playing South Carolina. We would be playing the conference championship either this week or next week. I think if he goes out against Notre Dame, puts up a great game, there is no chance he does not win the Heisman. I think he wins the Heisman. Think about it. You're going to have Kyle Trask win the Heisman, go out against Alabama, and if he doesn't put a great game up, everybody's going to be like, what? What's going on here? So I just don't see it. I see Clemson steadying the course. I think they win the game against Notre Dame. I think Trevor Lawrence wins the Heisman. Maybe I'm just a little bit of a homer. It is what it is. I don't know. It is what it is. Let's go ahead and do some picks for this weekend, though. We might as well do it while we're here. Thanks, guys, for sticking with us. Again, if you like what you see, please hit the like button, hit the notification bell, subscribe to the show. We appreciate it. We're trying to get 1,000 subscribers. I don't know where we are right now, but we're trying. Same over on Facebook. Please like the page, 4th and 16 Sports. Share it with friends. If you like college football, we're going to be doing this all year. Get with us. We're going to have fun. Let's do the first game that I want to talk about, obviously, because we don't know if it's going to happen, and it's kind of important, but we might as well. We got a nooner game. Ohio State's playing at East Lansing to take on Michigan State. Over-under is 59.5. Ohio State is favored 24 points. Give me your thoughts. Quick.
I think Ohio State wins that game by 21 or so.
I think so, too, because now the precedent is you got to win. You got to play, and you got to win.
It's not even that. They need to look good, too.
But that's what I'm saying.
They actually
you
really
got
need
to
to
do
look
it.
good.
Because right now, I'm telling you, the whole reason why they were dropped behind Clemson is not because of the amount of games. It's because they looked bad against Indiana. So I'm going to say I'm with you. I think they're probably going to win that game. I don't know if they cover by 24.
They probably
That's a
won't
lot.
cover that. That's a lot of points. Michigan State's defense isn't that
Maybe
bad.
21?
Yeah.
We'll go with that. Yeah, I think that too. I think Ohio State wins this game by 21. Got another noon game. Number 5 team in the country, Texas A&M, is going to be going to Auburn, Jordan-Hare Stadium, to take on the Tigers. Over-under is 49. Texas A&M is favored by 7.
Yeah, I think
I would go with that.
I'm going to take the Tigers.
Ooh.
Listen, Gus Magic has one in them this year.
Okay.
They always get an upset. It's always either Alabama, Georgia. This year it might be Florida A&M. They will get one this year. They get one every year. You know I'm right. They get someone every year, and they haven't gotten anyone yet. So just mathematically, there might not be a whole lot of logic involved in this. They're at home. Texas A&M has been playing terribly.
No, just this one game. Outside of that, their offense has been one of the most consistent in the country.
They gave up 31 to Arkansas as well.
That's defense.
Are we glossing over that?
Yeah, but Arkansas has actually turned out to be a better team than we thought. So I'm giving them the credit for that. Arkansas is a couple of bad refs away from having 2 more wins.
I think this is going to be a close game regardless. And I think
they only have Texas A&M as favored by 7.
Auburn's going to win a close one. That's my prediction.
I'm going to go the other way. I'm going to say Texas A&M is going to win this game just because I feel like Auburn's still reeling from getting their brains bashed in from Alabama in the Iron Bowl. I think that matters. I think they're going to have a little less confidence. They know they're going to a bowl game because everybody goes to a bowl game. Heck, Vanderbilt can go to a bowl game, and they've won no games. So I'm going to go with Texas A&M, and I'm going to say 10 points. I think 10 points is fair. I don't think that they're going to blow out, and especially with the offensive performance like they did this past week. I don't see it happening. Let's go to probably the most entertaining game, the one that I'm going to be on the edge of my seat for sure outside of the Clemson game. That is Liberty going down to Conway, South Carolina to take on Coastal Carolina. You got Liberty 9-1, couple of ACC team wins going against number 18 Coastal Carolina, who's undefeated. Coastal Carolina can really make a name for themselves. The over-under for this game is 57. Coastal Carolina is favored by 7. That tells you something. Them playing the way they are playing down in Conway, with Jamie Chadwell, we know that there's possible chance that he can get a job somewhere else. I think they play their minds off. Look, all respect to Hugh Freeze. I think Hugh Freeze has done a really good job with Liberty. They are formidable. They're going to get into a bowl game with somebody and probably shock them. I'm taking Coastal Carolina with that 7 points. I just feel like right now they're playing confident. I mean, they were winning games without Grayson McCall. 7 is appropriate though, because I feel like if this game might be a 3-point game. Who knows? Fax, do you have any thoughts on this game? Again, this is a pretty big game for Group of 5, actually, in my opinion.
I think the Chanticleers are going to win, and they might get the cover too. It seems like every week they're throttling whoever is thrown their way. I would be stupid to pick against them.
You know, though, again, Liberty.
They're a good team.
Really
this isn't
good.
Discrediting Liberty. It's just more tooting the horn of what Coastal Carolina's been doing.
I think so too. And you know, again, Coach Chadwell, he and his staff. You got Willie Corn down there calling plays. You know that, right? That's awesome. Clemson fans know all about that, but
Clemson legend.
Clemson legend Willie Corn. I'm going to go with Coastal Carolina for that one as well. Let's just do a game just because I have to. Florida is going to be going up to Knoxville. Going to take on Tennessee.
Blowout city.
Over under 61.5. Florida 17.5. Florida might win this game by like 40. I understand Tennessee is kind of reeling. I understand Florida did not look good in the first half of the game this past weekend. There was a chance that they could have lost, but they didn't. They have too much of a weapon with Kyle Trask and Kyle Pitts. I think Florida is going to blow them out. I think 17.5 is too low.
Yeah, I think they're going to win.
So let's move on from that. I don't care about it. Interesting game. This is probably one of the most important games, too, specifically for the Big Ten, because this is going to change things if Ohio State can't play. Iowa's going to Madison to take on the Badgers. Over-under is 45.5, so I think this is going to be a charger. A lot of that probably has to do with Michael Penix not playing. Wisconsin is favored by 14, even though Indiana is ranked higher. What do you have for this? Remember, Jack Tuttle is going to be taking over. Transfer from Utah, taking over for Michael Penix.
I think Wisconsin's going to win. I don't know if they'll cover, but they're going to win.
You know, this is crazy because it changes everything. Of course, Wisconsin has played 3 games this year, total. Indiana's defense is really good. I really like Freifogel. I think Scott is a really good running back. I just don't know, with Wisconsin playing so bad this past week against, the week ago against Northwestern, I just don't know that Wisconsin won't be angry. Graham Mertz is a great quarterback. I think they have some weapons over there now. I don't know that Indiana gets it done. but I'm going to say Wisconsin only wins by 3. I think this is going to be a much tougher game than Wisconsin is ready for. And I think this is going to change the impact of everything. Again, I think Ohio State's probably going to play this weekend, so it makes no sense to even think about this. But I think if Ohio State doesn't play, Indiana wins this game, they are locked to go to the conference championship. I think Northwestern's already locked.
So you think Wisconsin wins a closer game?
I think Wisconsin wins a 3-pointer.
I think that maybe get that 7 to 10 point
Yeah,
range,
I'll
take Wisconsin.
And remember, we talked about this too. Maybe Indiana's playing above their ability this year.
They are.
So I'm going to roll with that too. We're not going to Vanderbilt, Georgia. That's terrible. Oregon, Cal. We'll just do this quickly. Oregon got upset by Oregon State. I don't know what happened. I have no excuses. It is what it is. They're going to be taking on an 0-3 Cal team.
Cal's offensive line is the equivalent to a JV team.
They are traffic cones. They just let anybody go by. They literally
I feel bad for Garbers.
are terrible.
It's because they have like 4 starters out.
It's bad.
Because of COVID and miscellaneous
It's
injuries.
just bad. Over-run is 58. Oregon's favorite by 10. I'm taking that.
I'll take Oregon.
I'll take Oregon in this one. I think they get back on their groove. I still don't think that they're going to be in contention for the playoffs anymore. I think they ruined that. I think USC is now the only hope they can have.
And USC is not very good either.
I know, and Oregon's only 23, so that's not going to be a great win for
USC
them.
did have, I will say, a couple weeks ago against Utah. USC, that was a really good win.
But we talked about Utah. They just blew a 21-point lead.
USC looked better in that game, though, is what I'm trying to say. Like, they looked pretty good.
We might want to check on Kyle Whittingham's job. It's not looking good out there.
They should have beat Oregon last year in that title.
Yeah,
game.
they absolutely should.
It was his fault that they didn't win that game.
So we'll move on to this one. I'm super excited about this one. Alabama is going down to Baton Rouge, take on LSU. Over-under 67.5. Alabama's favorite by 29.5. Now, remember, last year, they went to Bryant-Denny and, for the most part, made Alabama's defense look silly. Tua had a chance. They were going to go up there. He fumbled right before going into the end zone. That really changed their confidence. Joe Burrow came out there, put on a clinic. They kept them from going to the SEC championship game and went on to win the national championship. Everybody talked about, LSU is now the new gold standard for the SEC. Alabama did not take that lightly. 29.5 will be accomplished in the first quarter. I am going to say Alabama. I'm going to go ahead and put out here now. Alabama, because of what happened last year and because Alabama wants to set the precedent that they are, in fact, the best team in the country, I'm going to say they win by like 42. Look, Texas A&M, 27-7. They had one of the worst offensive games ever. Kellen Mond, I don't know what happened. But Alabama's not going to have that problem. They're going to be scoring literally every other drive, if not every single drive. LSU would be hard-pressed to put up 21 points against this Alabama defense right now. I'm going to say a score of like 68-14. I think Alabama's going to hammer them this year. I think they're going to set the precedent that they are and always have been in the well, I always have been. Alabama's been pretty bad over the year in the last 20 years, but for the last 12 years, they have been the standard of the SEC. I think Alabama blows them out. What do you think?
Blowout city for Alabama.
Yeah.
It's not going to be close. I'd be shocked if it was close.
William Kirsten says Coach O's locker room speech from last year is going to be blasted on a loop. Remember, Alabama gets mad about stuff. They do hold on to this stuff because remember, Clemson beat them in the national championship in 2016. And you have Tony Brown, remember after the game, Hunter Renfro, he lied. He ain't trying to shake my hand. And Dabo Swinney, he lied too. They were mad in 2017 against Clemson. And they took Clemson to the woodshed. It is what it is. I wholeheartedly believe that's what's going to happen in this game. I think Alabama's going to blow them out. It'd be nice if Northwestern could play a game so we could see what we can actually feel about them. Remember, they got mad because they were talking about, the Fighting Reeses of Northwestern because, hey, they're undefeated, blah, blah, blah. And they were like, hey, yeah, you didn't pick us, and we showed you we're definitely worth the number 8 ranking in the country. And then you go and get beat. You didn't get beat by a good football team.
Got beat by Michigan State.
You got beat by Michigan State. They're playing Minnesota. They were playing Minnesota, but Minnesota has had the highest amount of COVID cases in college football. I don't know if you know that. Minnesota, I don't know how they've played a game. They're 2-3. It didn't matter. This game's not being played. What that means, because Northwestern has played 6 games, only lost 1. They have locked up Big Ten West. Doesn't matter. They didn't have to play this game. But what would be funny is if Ohio State wins this weekend, Indiana loses, and Ohio State plays Northwestern. But Northwestern wins.
That'd be fun.
I don't know what we would do in that case. I think college football, we should stop watching college football. But, folks, we're at the end of the show. I appreciate you guys sticking with us. It was fun. It was a little bit of a long one. But, hey, we were off last week, so we're going to try to have some fun again. We'll be back next Tuesday to talk more college football. Next Tuesday, we should know more things about the conference championships. We should know everything being shaped up. I'm guessing everything stays pretty much status quo. But keep your eye out. There's going to be some interesting storylines this weekend. With that said, it's always great to be a Clemson Tiger. Catch you guys next Tuesday, 7 p.m. right here on